If you have children 5 to 11 years old, I'm sure you have been worried about their safety in the current COVID-19 crisis. Up until now, there has been no vaccine for these young children. And as a result, they're exposed to a lot of risk, right? They're having to go to school, maybe wear a mask all day, which I can imagine must be very inconvenient and uncomfortable for these young children. So they have a lot of risk. But as a result, you and your family also is exposed to a lot of risk on a daily basis. Well, the good news is that FDA has just authorized for emergency use the Pfizer-BioNTech mRNA vaccine for children in this age group. So that should come as welcome news to parents. Hello everyone, I'm Naveen Agarwal, and I want to welcome all of you to my weekly video update. So I'm sure many parents are going to be thrilled about this news, but many other parents still remain concerned about the safety and effectiveness of these vaccines, especially for children this young. So share in your comments below, what are your thoughts and comments? Are you thrilled about this? Are you going to talk to your pediatrician right away and see if you can get the vaccine quickly? Or are you still on the fence about safety and effectiveness? What are your unanswered questions that you would like to discuss? Please share that in the comments below, and I'll follow up as soon as I possibly can. But from my viewpoint, and I have young children of my own, slightly older age group right now, but from my viewpoint, this is great news. I think it gives us another tool to manage this risk of COVID-19, which still remains with us. So that's all I say. On a general level, it makes sense. But on an individual level, make sure you are discussing this with your pediatrician or your doctor to get your specific questions answered. But what I talk about here is more from a general viewpoint. This is a good solution. I've looked at the data. I'm going to show that to you very briefly in this presentation. But continue to share your comments and questions below. Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at the data that was presented to the Independent Vaccine Advisory Committee panel by the FDA and by also Pfizer-BioNTech. And that's how the process works. A lot of data is shown, much more discussion happens, many Q&As, and after that, the committee makes a recommendation to go ahead or not to go ahead. In this case, they have made the recommendation to go with the emergency use authorization, and FDA has followed through. So now it is authorized. Then the next step is the CDC convenes its own independent panel to review the data once again and now have more of a policy discussion. Who to include, who not to include, how to roll it out. Things like that happens in that CDC discussion, and that also has happened. So really, it's out of the gate now. It's available. Go to your pediatrician and talk about this as soon as you possibly can. So we look at the data, but most importantly, towards the end of my presentation, so make sure you stick around, I want to tell you the statement, share with you the statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's a very important voice, and why I believe there's a sense of urgency, great sense of urgency about this particular question, because young children continue to remain at very high risk. I'll talk about that. So let's look into the data right away. So it is now authorized by the FDA, 5 to 11 years old. CDC now recommends everyone ages 5 and older to get vaccinated. It's a very clear recommendation. American Academy of Pediatrics is also supporting vaccination for younger kids, and we'll talk about that later during this video. The important thing is it's a lower dose compared to the adult version, but you still need 2 doses, and they are 3 weeks apart. Same dose schedule as adults. But the amount of mRNA is lower. Believe me, still works. We'll look into the data. So it's not like lower amount will not work. It is still working. And there are some changes in the formulation that makes it a little bit more stable at less cold temperatures, because the other vaccine needs to be refrigerated at a very, very low temperature. So it makes it easy to distribute and makes it available very quickly all over the country. So only the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is authorized for younger kids. This is a nice table I found on the CDC website. I'll give you a link. You will find that right here at the bottom. Only 5 to 11 years old and 12 to 17 years old have an option. Unfortunately, 4 years and under, there is still no option. And 18 years and older, all 3 vaccines are available to them. So this is the only one that is available. Also note that Pfizer-BioNTech is the only vaccine which is fully approved for 18 years and older. The other two age groups, it's under emergency use authorization. So let's look at the clinical trials. It is still ongoing with children in this age group. 4 countries are involved: US, Finland, Spain, and Poland. And about 20% of the participants have existing medical conditions, obesity, asthma, and things like that. So this is the study design. It's a very good study. It includes about 3,000 people, 2-to-1 randomized. That means twice as many people or kids are getting the vaccine versus placebo. It's randomized double-blinded study, which is the gold standard how clinical trials are supposed to be done. 2 doses, 3 weeks apart. And it's a 10 microgram dose, not a 30 microgram dose that I talked about for adults. So let's look at the effectiveness data that they are finding right now. This is 7 days after dose 2. In the vaccine group, they found only 3 cases of COVID at the time of reporting of this data. 3 out of, let's say, 1,300 or so. And in the placebo group, they found 16. So as a result, they do the calculations, and there are many more numbers here, footnotes, details. You can dig into that paperwork or data if you like. But the bottom line is that the vaccine effectiveness is about 90.7%. I want us to pay attention to the range. So that's a calculation. Sometimes we look at one number and just believe that number. Right now, because the data set is small, there's more uncertainty and there's a range, 67 to about 98. I believe finally it'll be in the 90s when more data becomes available. But I want to be transparent with you about what the data is telling us now. Even 67, if it was even 67, it is a pretty good number. It compares well with the other effectiveness data we have seen from other clinical trials of this vaccine. For adults, for example, the mRNA vaccines are showing about 90% effectiveness. So this really maps very well with that particular data, even though it's at a lower dose, right? That's the one point I made. Okay, so immune response comparison is also important data because it allows us to be more confident in this decision. Remember, there's a big range in effectiveness because of small amount of data. This data allows us, it's more of a indirect conclusion. And what they look at is the level of neutralizing antibodies. So this is how they did the study. They looked at a group of kids, 5 to 11 years old, that were given 2 doses, 10 micrograms each. And they looked at the neutralizing antibody to Washington strain of the coronavirus 1 month after dose 2. And then they looked at the same information from another group, from another clinical trial which is ongoing, 18 to 25 years of age. But they received the 30 microgram, 2 doses, again 1 month later. So what they want to see is the younger kids, is their neutralizing antibody level going to be about the same or more compared to this group, right? And the answer really is, it is about the same. The ratio of geometric mean titers, which is shown here, is about 1.04, which is about the same. Interesting question then. Is the 30 microgram given to adults too much? Do they really need 30 micrograms? Or these kids in the 5 to 11 years old are responding in a much better way or much stronger way compared to the adults? These are good questions. We still don't know the answer to that, but the fact is it still works. Even at 10 microgram level, the level of neutralizing antibody is about the same as 1 month after dose 2, what they saw in the other group, which is great news. And that's how they are showing this information and making this decision in light of the limited effectiveness data, because a lot more data is available from the clinical trial that happened with the adult group. So if it worked in that group and we can show that the neutralizing antibody levels is about the same in the younger kids even at a lower dose, we have confidence to believe, we can believe very confidently that it will work, right? That's the basis of that decision. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about the safety data. I'll just summarize it for you. Their conclusion was that it is no different or no worse than what they have seen in the other group, with the clinical trials in the adults. So you might expect pain at the injection site. You might expect some redness, some swelling. You might expect some fever, some fatigue, and they are at kind of lower severity levels. Typically, they will go away 1 to 2 days later, right? Now, there are some adverse events reported at a very low frequency, and they are also not extremely serious. More importantly, there was no case of myocarditis or pericarditis reported in this particular group, which is a concern for young children. And these are serious conditions with the heart, where the lining of the heart or the heart muscle can get inflamed and cause all kind of complications. And we are worried about that, especially for young children. So there was no case. Now, it's still, data is being monitored, right? They're still going to follow up with the safety data and see how it evolves, but there is no reason to believe that the risk will be high of myocarditis or pericarditis based on what they have looked so far. So the story, the bottom line is, there are no new risks compared to what we have seen in the past, and the benefit is clearly demonstrated that it is effective, and the immunobridging study is showing that the level of antibodies would be about the same as we would expect from the adult group. Bottom line is, it works. It is safe and effective. But again, let me emphasize, this is the general conclusion. At an individual level, there might be other factors that you must consider and talk to your doctor about. But that's what I would ask you to do. In light of this information, please make an appointment with your pediatrician as soon as possible and discuss your child's specific condition with them and ask the question if it'll be safe and effective, it's the right course of action. That's the way you can get all your questions answered, not through all the articles that you see on social media or some information that is floating around. I'll make a few more comments about safety because I listened into the press conference that FDA had with reporters on this particular issue. And one of the questions that was asked, which is floating around, relates to fertility, impact on fertility, and people are worried about that question in young children. The FDA chief doctor that was on the press conference, Dr. Marks, was categorical in saying there's no reason, there's no connection at all. They fully understand how these vaccines work, and he explained that very nicely. So I'll give you a link to that press conference video. I really encourage all of you to listen to that. And it's okay to still have questions, but please ask those questions to your pediatrician and don't stop asking until you get an answer that satisfies you. But I hope you will reach out to a credible source like your pediatrician to ask that question. Okay, so finally, I want to share with you why there is such a high sense of urgency on this particular issue. Now, since the pandemic began, close to 2 million kids in this age group through the month of October, about middle of October, had been infected with COVID. 2 million. And about 8,500 or so were hospitalized, some with very serious condition. About half of them did not have any underlying medical issues, so it could happen to anybody. And about 140, unfortunately, died. Kids this young, they died. So if you compare to just hospitalization for flu, that happens too, right? And many people are making that comparison. You know, the number is for flu, less than 1 out of 100,000 kids might end up in a hospital. But for COVID, that number is about 30. So very big difference, very big chance that if your child catches COVID, it might turn into something serious. And we want to avoid that. So in general, there's a very high sense of urgency because kids in this age group continue to be exposed to the risk of infection, especially because we have a very high rate of transmission in many parts of the country. With new variants coming, Delta variant, highly infectious, that risk still remains. So we have to understand that, and that's why there's a sense of urgency. So in this context, I want to share with you what I heard or what I read about from American Academy of Pediatrics. That's a very, very interesting statement to think about. So here's the statement they are making. There's a link there at the top, and I'll give you as part of this video. Pediatricians are standing by to talk with families about the vaccine and to administer the vaccine to children as soon as possible. So they are fully supportive and they're inviting you to make an appointment with your pediatrician and ask all the questions that you have in mind. The risk remains high. The benefit is very clear on a general basis that the vaccine is safe and effective, and it will cut down the likelihood of your child ending up in the hospital or having very serious complication because of COVID-19. Having said that, I emphasize again, individual level risk you must evaluate by talking to your pediatrician. And that is why your next action, and I urge you to take that with great urgency if you have children in this age group, next action should be to schedule an appointment or give a phone call to your pediatrician and ask the question if you should get your child vaccinated as soon as possible. But it is supported by data, it is supported by American Academy of Pediatrics, and you can go do some more research about this. But not taking that action is probably not a good idea, and I would strongly recommend you make that phone call or schedule that appointment as soon as possible. I hope this is useful, but share in your comments below your thoughts. I welcome all thoughts and comments and questions. Even if you don't agree or you have some serious concerns, I want to engage with you in a conversation, in a dialogue, and follow up on those questions as much as I possibly can. I want to thank you for your interest and attention, and I hope all of you are continuing to stay safe in these difficult circumstances.